The day Stephen Shaw found out I was a corporate spy, he pointed a gun at me, his face cold as ice. Any last words? I love you. Then I plunged into the sea. The notoriously ruthless Stephen Shaw panicked, and for 3 years, he had his men search the coast for me. I died at sea. Or, to be more precise, I took the money and ran. I'd been hired to sabotage the Shaw Group's stock. I spent 4 painstaking years embedded by Stephen's side, becoming his most trusted confidant. Once the mission was complete, the Shaw family's funding collapsed, and their stock went into a nosedive. I made off with more money than I could spend in a lifetime. 3 years later, not only had the Shaw family not collapsed, but Stephen had pulled it back from the brink, making the company more successful than ever. Stephen issued an order to have the coast scoured for me for 3 years. The command was to find me dead or alive. I suspect he just hated my guts and couldn't stand the thought of me resting in peace. I recently heard that Stephen has turned over a new leaf. He's given up his wild lifestyle and plans to marry someone from a good family. When I saw the news, I just stared blankly. He used to dote on me, wanting to give me the entire world. Too bad I was a liar. Leo, why'd you stop drinking? Don't tell me you're chickening out. The clear voice broke through my thoughts. I looked at the guy in front of me, a mischievous grin on his face. This was my new target, Caleb Smith. I was planning on retiring, but a hacker friend of mine sent out an SOS, asking me to help him get a confidential file from the Smith Corporation. Couldn't say no. I owed the guy a favor. Of course, I'm not chickening out. But if I finish this bottle, you have to keep me company, Mr. Smith. Deal. I'll not only keep you company, I'll take you somewhere fun. Caleb was handsome, but his smile held a perverse edge that always kept you guessing. I tipped the bottle back and chugged it. The alcohol flooded my senses. Just as my head started spinning, someone walked through the door. Everyone called him Mr. Shaw. He didn't say a word, but from his arrogant stride, I knew exactly who it was without even looking. The alcohol went down the wrong pipe, and I bent over, coughing. Caleb patted my back, then slid his arm around me. Wow, you really finished it. Impressive, baby. I'll reward you properly tonight. A shiver went down my spine. I forced a laugh and kept my head down. Stephen walked to the center of the sofa and sat. Caleb and a few other rich kids immediately started sucking up to him. The Shaw family was the hottest name in town, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. Stephen glanced around, his eyes skipping right over me. After all, to appeal to Caleb, I'd gone for an edgy punk look, a far cry from the clean-cut college kid I used to be. Young Mr. Smith's new boy toy is unique, Stephen remarked casually. Caleb just smiled. Yeah, I like unique. Come on, toast Mr. Shaw. He tapped my shoulder. I didn't dare make eye contact with Stephen, but I couldn't refuse, so I just bowed my head, my bright red hair hiding my face, and meekly raised my glass. The private room was dark. Stephen took a sip of his drink, his voice flat. Caleb, this place is full of shady characters. Your father is worried about you. He specifically asked me to stop by and tell you to be careful, especially of the people you keep close. My heart skipped a beat. I snuck a look at Stephen. He was calmly chatting with someone else, looking every bit the business elite he was. If he'd recognized me, he would have already rushed over to skin me alive. I breathed a sigh of relief, told Caleb I wasn't feeling well, and hurried to the restroom. I spent a while throwing up in the bathroom. By the time I came back, Stephen was gone. Caleb, completely drunk, threw an arm around me and said he was taking me somewhere fun. The driver took us to a private club. It was a place Caleb owned called Nanting. I'd been playing cat and mouse with Caleb for half a month. He was always trying to get me into bed, but I couldn't let him succeed that easily. I had to string him along until I became someone he trusted. I was lost in my own plans. Suddenly, a black car slammed into us. Caleb froze, but before he could even start cursing, a second impact threw us sideways. The driver lost control and we crashed into the guardrail. Caleb's head hit the windshield, and blood started streaming down his forehead. My head was spinning, but thankfully I reacted fast enough to avoid injury. I threw the car door open, ready to run. The next second, a black hood was thrown over my head. I think I was kidnapped. When I came to, groggy and disoriented, I was still trying to figure out if it was Caleb's enemies or mine. Suddenly, the familiar scent of a man's cologne washed over me. The damp, woody fragrance of a forest after the rain. The one I'd picked out for Stephen. Sorry about this. Caleb's been making trouble for me behind my back lately, so I had to teach him a lesson. I was panicking, but I forced myself to sound calm. Then go settle your score with him. Why kidnap me? A dry chuckle. The flick of a lighter. The smell of tobacco filled the air. My eyes were covered, but I could hear him leaning in close. Why'd I kidnap you? What do you think? Leo. He spat my name out through gritted teeth. The knot of anxiety in my stomach finally dissolved into dread. I gave up and let out a weak laugh. Since you found me, just kill me or torture me. Do whatever you want. My hands were tied behind my back. I had a tiny blade hidden in my sleeve, and I started fumbling for it. Before I kill you, I have a question. Go ahead, Mr. Shaw. You lied to me for so long. There was a flicker of tension in Stephen's otherwise calm voice. Was what you said to me 3 years ago true? That I love you? I scoffed. Mr. Shaw, you didn't actually believe that, did you? Ha 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 ha, of course it was a lie. He grabbed my collar. Stephen looked like he wanted to punch me, but he held back. Leo, you're a goddamn ungrateful bastard. You have no heart. Of course not. Liars don't have hearts. I kept him talking while my fingers closed around the blade and started sawing at the rope. His eyes grew cold. Are you after Caleb for his money, too? Do you have any idea what kind of psycho he is? That place he was taking you, Nanting, is a playground for perverts. None of his lovers have ever walked out of there in one piece. I paused. No wonder Caleb always seemed to have a dark streak. So the guy was a genuine psycho. I just shrugged, pretending not to care. No guts, no glory. Right, Stephen? Leo, you'd really do anything for money. His tone, full of contempt and sarcasm, actually made my cold heart ache for a moment. The sound of a gun being cocked. My heart hammered in my chest. The rope was almost cut. I put on the same innocent smile he used to love. Stephen, since I'm about to die anyway, can you just hold me one last time? Stephen froze for a second, but then he leaned in and wrapped his arms around me. His fingers brushed through my red hair, his voice low and raspy. Leo, you were much better behaved when you looked like your old self. Oh, was I? The rope snapped. I raised my hand, aiming the blade at his stomach. In an instant, he grabbed my wrist in a death grip. Stephen twisted my arm, his face grim. I cried out as the blade clattered to the floor. The cold muzzle of the gun pressed against my temple. I froze. I wasn't afraid to die, but I didn't want to die in front of Stephen. It would be too ugly, too undignified. When I didn't react, he asked, "Aren't you afraid of dying?" I curved my lips into a careless smile. Dying at your hands wouldn't be so bad, Mr. Shaw. A few seconds passed. Stephen didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he used the gun to tilt my chin up. Humph. A quick death is too easy for you. Then what do you want? When you were my lover, it was $30,000 a month. But you swindled my company out of $300 million. How many times do you think you owe me? A terrible premonition crept over me. Stephen, stop messing around. That'll kill someone. I didn't care if he destroyed himself, but I had no intention of being destroyed with him. Better to just shoot me. Stephen let out a cold laugh. Then go ahead and die. He shoved me hard. I fell onto a soft carpet. Click. My wrists and ankles were cuffed together. Ah, be gentle. What are you crying about? You weren't this delicate before. Stephen grumbled as he applied ointment to my back. I was facing away from him, so I didn't see his ears turning slightly red. He'd been rough with me last night, and my whole body ached. When I woke up today, I felt like I was going to fall apart. He was being gentler now, but I still couldn't help but whimper in pain. Suddenly, he slapped my lower back. Ah, Stephen, you bastard. Stop screaming like that, or I really will become a bastard. His voice was dangerously low. I got the message and immediately shut up. I lay on the bed, not wanting to move. Stephen had breakfast brought up and fed it to me himself. As I ate, I secretly surveyed the villa. It was surrounded by woods. probably one of his new properties. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. His assistant came in with a tablet to report on work, finally asking Stephen to confirm various details for the wedding. Stephen glanced at the screen, then turned back to me. What kind of flowers do you think would be best for the wedding? Was he trying to mess with me on purpose? Making his old flame help plan his wedding? How should I know? I've never been married, I said, rolling my eyes. You don't have to have eaten pork to know what a pig looks like. Just give me some ideas. He sounded completely serious, as if he really valued this wedding. A wave of irritation washed over me. Go ask your bride-to-be. Leave me alone. I rolled over, turning my back to him. The assistant stood off to the side, his eyes fixed on the floor, careful not to look. Did Stephen's fiancée know he was gay? Then again, marriages between powerful families were usually just arrangements of convenience. The more I thought about it, the more annoyed I got, wishing I could get out of here right now. But I couldn't leave. Under the covers, my ankle was cuffed to the bedpost. Stephen and I gave each other the silent treatment all day. He went to his study to work. He still hadn't come back by the time I was about to fall asleep. The chef he hired seemed to be the same one as before. Dinner was perfectly to my taste, and I ate 2 big bowls. As drowsiness washed over me, I started feeling unusually hot. I just figured summer was coming. In the middle of the night, a hand snuck under the covers and grabbed my ankle. He had almost finished exploring my entire body before I finally woke up. I blinked sleepily at the figure silhouetted in the dim light. Stephen was still in his suit, the collar slightly unbuttoned, looking elegant under the lamplight. But the way his hands moved over my leg was utterly depraved. He patted my cheek. Don't sleep. Get up. Time for more. I kicked at him. He blocked it, kneeling on the edge of the bed and pressing down on me. His light breath ghosted across my face. What, is cuffing your right foot not enough? You want me to tie up your whole body? He hooked a finger under the strap of my pajama top and slowly pulled it loose. I bit my lip. Stop it. Just kill me. I can't take any more. Oh? Stephen raised a hand. My pajama top fell to the floor. He bent down. I couldn't help but grip the sheets. Damn it. Seems like you can take it just fine. You son of a... Before I could finish my curse, his mouth was on mine. Hard and urgent. I seriously suspected he wanted me to die in this bed. It was another long night. Stephen's stamina was incredible. The most twisted part was that he wouldn't let me sleep. If I so much as closed my eyes, he'd bite me. That bastard. My voice was hoarse as I begged him to stop. Stephen gripped my chin. Leo, did you ever think about me all these years? If you tell me the truth, I'll stop tormenting you. I was stunned for a moment, then curved my lips into a seductive smile. Yes. His movements faltered for a second, his gaze softening. My smile became even more enchanting. Mr. Shaw is one of the richest men in the country. I might forget anyone else, but I'd never forget your money. My ambiguous answer infuriated Stephen. He bent down and bit my lip. Leo, you're really asking for it. By the time Stephen realized I was sick, it was the next day. He tried to wake me up for breakfast, but I didn't have the strength to open my eyes. Stephen touched my forehead, swore under his breath, and immediately called for the family doctor. He watched over me all morning. I could faintly hear his phone ringing constantly. He must have had company business to attend to, because he left in the afternoon. The sound of the car's engine faded into the distance. The next second, I opened my eyes. The family doctor was preparing an for me. He muttered to himself as he took out a vial. This Shaw guy seems so proper, but he's a real monster. Does he want to screw someone to death? Now I have to clean up his mess. What an animal. I agree. My voice made him jump. Just as the doctor started to turn around, there was a dull thud. The man in the white coat collapsed to the floor. I rubbed my wrists. If Stephen hadn't completely drained me, knocking someone out wouldn't have been this much work. I changed into the doctor's clothes, put on a mask, and walked out. After escaping the Shaw villa, the first thing I did was go find Caleb. I'd heard he'd nearly gotten a concussion from the car crash. He spent a few days in the hospital before going right back to his old habits of partying at bars. I deliberately waited for him at one of his usual haunts. Caleb staggered out, completely drunk. He was surrounded by a flock of pretty boys. The streetlights were dim, but you could still see their caked-on makeup. Disgusting. He irritably pushed the boys away, telling them to get lost. I took the opportunity to step forward and support him. "Mr. Smith." Caleb turned and stared at me, stunned. "Well, look who's still alive." I sneered inwardly but put on a pitiful expression. "Mr. Smith, I was kidnapped that day. I think it was your enemies. They kept hitting me, trying to get me to spill your secrets. But I don't know anything." Tears welled up in my eyes. If I ever went into acting, I'd at least win an Oscar. I wiped the tears from the corner of my eye, deliberately showing him the bruises on my wrist. Caleb studied the black and blue marks on my body and seemed to believe me. "Sorry about that. I have a lot of enemies. You probably got caught in the crossfire. Here, let me see." He rubbed my wrist. His words were full of pity, but his eyes glinted with excitement. The raw marks from the rough handling stood out, red and stark against my pale skin. To Caleb, they were beautiful, and he was even tempted to try making some himself. "Does it hurt?" Caleb asked. I nodded. He smiled that perverse smile of his and put his arm around me. "Don't worry, I'll have my people look into it. Nobody touches my people and gets away with it, right?" He was all talk. Otherwise, why hadn't he looked for me once during the days I was missing? Drunk, Caleb had me take him home. The whole way, he kept trying to lift my shirt to see the other marks on my body. The hidden madness in his eyes made my stomach turn. This guy really was a freak. Caleb's head injury hadn't fully healed, and combined with the heavy drinking, he'd been getting frequent headaches. I used acupuncture to help him. After a few days of my care, he finally let his guard down. "You're a great cook," Caleb said, eating the meal I'd prepared. Of course I was. After dealing with someone as picky as Steven, I'd honed my perfect lover skills to a fine art. After finishing his soup, Caleb casually raised an eyebrow at me. "Leo, you want to try something exciting?" "What? How about I take you to Nanting tonight? Show you something new?" "Mr. Smith, your health." "I'm fine, don't worry." Caleb kissed the back of my hand. I suppressed a shudder, my heart soaring with excitement. Perfect. He was finally going to let me into his inner circle. I'd heard that besides the perverted transactions, Nanting was also a hub for a lot of shady business. The Smith family had been investigated several times, but they always walked away clean. I suspected that Caleb's most important confidential files and ledgers were hidden there. Late at night, a blue sports car pulled up to Nanting. The club was well hidden. You had to go through a convenience store, take an elevator down to the third basement level, and walk down a pitch-black hallway before you finally saw the club sign. Everyone inside bowed respectfully, calling out, "Good evening, Mr. Smith." Caleb slung an arm casually around my shoulders, pointing out the different areas as we walked. As we passed a few doors, I could hear whimpering and begging from inside. Caleb watched my face and smiled. "Leo, you're probably not used to this at first. You'll get used to it. Once you're familiar with the place, I'll make you the manager here. 50 grand a month." I scoffed inwardly but nodded and agreed humbly. He just wanted to play his games with me here. The money was just bait. Caleb pushed open a door that led to his private lounge. He poured me a glass of water. I was wary and didn't drink it. Caleb pressed a button on the desk lamp, and an entire section of the wall began to move. It flipped around to reveal a wall covered with an array of props. I looked at all the items and couldn't help but take a step back. "These are all my treasures. What do you think?" he asked, taking down a whip and eyeing me playfully. I forced a stiff smile. "Mr. Smith, you're joking, right? When have I ever joked with you?" Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Come here. Sit in the chair and cuff yourself." From what I knew of Caleb, the more submissive I was, the faster he'd lose interest. I had to do the opposite. "Mr. Smith, I'm with you to make money, not to play these games. You should find someone else." I turned to leave. I twisted the doorknob, only to find that it required a key card to open. A low chuckle came from behind me. Caleb swung the long whip. The air whistled as the whip cracked. The tip landed right next to my feet with a loud smack. Perfectly precise. It was clear he was an expert. Leo, don't you know that being my lover comes with more money than you could ever spend? And then what? You'll get tired of me one day. I don't want to be abandoned and left with nothing. Caleb snorted and used the whip to lift my chin. Are you saying you want to be my long-term partner? Why not? I met his gaze, my tone challenging. He studied me for a few seconds, then slowly put the whip away. You've got some ambition. It's been a long time since I've met someone so direct and bold. Plenty of people tried to curry favor with the Smith family, but no one dared to so openly demand benefits from him. I thought Caleb would be angry, but he opened a drawer and tossed me a stack of documents. This is the basic information on Nanting and the rules for our VIPs. Get familiar with it. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I took the file with trembling hands. Flipping through it, I saw that the requirements for membership were incredibly strict. You needed proof of assets, had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and more. If that was the case, it would be easy for Caleb to get leverage on those high-ranking members, wouldn't it? No wonder the outside world could never find any dirt on the Smith family. I quickly skimmed a few pages. Caleb said, "What's the rush? There's a 1-month trial period. I'm not going to back out. You can read it later. I just don't want to disappoint you, Mr. Smith." "Ha, you're just afraid you won't get your money, aren't you?" He patted my cheek, then spun me around and pinned me against the desk. "You kid, act like you've never seen money in your life. But lucky for you, I've got plenty of it. Spend the night with me here. What do you say?" He toyed with the collar of my shirt. Caleb, the young master who'd never known a day of real hardship. If he'd ever had to fight dogs for scraps, I wonder if he'd still be able to say something so callous. Caleb kissed my neck and was about to continue. There was a knock on the door. He irritably told them to get lost. A moment later, the phone in the room rang. Caleb answered it, annoyed. "Mr. Smith, your father is looking for you." His passion died instantly. A recent company project had been going poorly, and he dreaded his father asking about it. Caleb left to report back home, leaving me alone at Nanting. I've been an orphan since I was a child. If my boss hadn't taken me in, I would have frozen to death on the street. My boss trained a group of us to carry out all sorts of missions. He thought I was good-looking and made me a corporate spy. I never knew my boss's name or identity. We only ever communicated through his bodyguard. The first few spy missions were simple. Just infiltrate a company, use a few tricks and connections to get into a management position, and I could naturally get the information. But after every mission, when the stock market shook, people's lives were lost. Watching the news reports made my stomach churn. I asked to quit, and my boss said he'd let me go after one last job. I looked at the thick file on Stephen Shaw and knew this was going to be a tough one. He was strict, and I couldn't find a way in through work. Later, through a twist of fate, he took an interest in me. A 2-year mission dragged on for 4 years, because he was just too captivating. Stephen could be ruthless to everyone else, but with me, he was always gentle. Having never known what it was like to be loved, I suddenly didn't want to leave him, but I still had to complete the mission. If I didn't, I would die. I succeeded in crippling the Shaw Group for a while. My boss profited greatly, and in his good mood, he terminated our contract. The moment the tracking chip was removed from the back of my neck, I felt truly free for the first time. 3 years passed. Now I'm back in this dangerous and thrilling line of work. Looking at the various cameras in the hallways of Nanting, I expertly avoided them. Turned out I still loved this job, because danger itself is intoxicating. The satisfaction of overcoming it is a better high than dopamine. I spent 2 weeks wandering around Nanting. I'd figured out the basic layout. I could go anywhere I wanted except for Caleb's study. Only the accountant had ever been in there. Every night, the rooms at Nanting were lively. All sorts of strange sounds would come from behind the closed doors. On Sundays, they would even host masquerade parties in the top-floor ballroom. I'd never been. The scenes up there were too scandalous to watch. But a crowd was the perfect cover for my work. In my free time, I'd smoke on the terrace. My phone was constantly pushing news updates. Steven's wedding date was approaching, but his fiancée had yet to make a public appearance, and everyone was curious. At a project launch, a reporter pressed him about who he was marrying. He just smiled faintly. "She's a bit shy, so we're keeping it private." The media immediately started praising him as a devoted husband. Rich and loyal. Bullshit. What loyalty? If people knew he was gay, would they still be singing his praises? I irritably stubbed out my cigarette. Another weekend arrived. More and more cars were pulling up outside Nanting. By midnight, the rich kids would be at the peak of their revelry. I dodged the cameras and went to the main circuit breaker, cutting the wires inside. In an instant, Nanting was plunged into darkness. I navigated through the dark to Caleb's office, guided by memory. Complaints and shouts echoed around me. In the chaos, employees rushed to check the situation. I used the accountant's keycard to open Caleb's study. I fumbled around in the dark and finally found Caleb's computer. I started downloading the data. Caleb's desk drawers had nothing important. After searching for a while, I found a secret in one of his Japanese nesting dolls. The doll contained a hidden mechanism. When I pressed it, a hidden safe in the wall was revealed. I glanced at my watch. 3 minutes until the emergency lights came on. I started working on the safe. The ticking of the clock was deafening. Sweat beaded on my forehead. With 1 minute to spare, I opened the safe. I quickly took a few pictures of the documents inside, pulled out the USB drive, shut down the computer, and slipped out of the study. But I couldn't even breathe a sigh of relief. I ran right into Caleb in the hallway. The emergency lights flickered on. The hallway was dimly lit. Caleb stared at me, his eyes dark. "What are you doing here?" "The power went out. I'm afraid of the dark, and I got lost." Caleb looked like he'd had a lot to drink. His cheeks flushed. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration, then grabbed my tie. "I'm in a shitty mood today. You're going to play with me." "Mr. Smith, I don't think that's a good idea. The power just went out, the guests need to be looked after." "That's their problem. The only person you need to look after right now is me." Caleb's breath was hot. It ghosted past my ear, and goosebumps erupted on my skin. He kicked the door to the lounge open. Caleb impatiently shoved me inside. I tried to stall, but he had run out of patience. He frowned and pushed me onto a strangely shaped sofa. "Shut up. From now on, you call me master." My wrists were cuffed. He fastened a collar around my neck. A small bell on it jingled with the slightest movement. A leash was attached to the collar, the other end in Caleb's hand. He gave it a sharp tug, forcing me to look up at him. Caleb's expression was cold. "What's your relationship with Stephen Shaw?" I was caught off guard. Before I could answer, a whip lashed across my leg. I sucked in a sharp breath. Caleb narrowed his eyes. "He's been looking for you everywhere." "You didn't know?" "How would I know? I don't even know him." "Didn't you look at my background check, Mr. Smith? You're going to doubt me on this?" He studied my expression, and seeming to decide I wasn't lying, he used the whip to lift the hem of my shirt. "You're right. A poor student like you. How could you have any connection to someone like Shaw? He probably just took a liking to you when we had drinks with him that one time." He unbuttoned my shirt. Kneeling between my legs, he leaned in close. "I don't care who you were with before. From now on, you're my dog. Understand?" "Yes, Mr. Smith." "What did you call me?" "You sick freak." I just couldn't bring myself to say those 2 words. So Caleb started using his wall of treasures on me. The feeling of the electric current drove me half mad. My fingers trembled as I tried to reach the cuff of my sleeve. The cufflink was a micro device that could send an SOS to Kay, the hacker. Just as I touched it, Caleb ripped my clothes off and threw them across the room. The next second, he tossed me into the bathtub. Caleb was a true, unadulterated sadist. He liked edging and breath play. A few minutes later, he pulled me out of the tub. I sputtered and choked, gasping for air. The bell on my collar jingled. Caleb's eyes lit up as he looked at me. He patted my cheek and grabbed my hair. "Is it so hard to call me master?" I ignored him. He laughed. "Leo, the more you resist, the more I want to break you." The thought of you crawling to me on your own, it's just too fascinating. As if he could dream on. I was here to be a spy, not a dog. Caleb held me down in the bathtub, again and again. His commands were a constant drone in my ears. Suddenly, the door was kicked hard. Before I could react, the door splintered open. A tall figure rushed in. The pressure on my neck released. Stephen yanked Caleb away and landed a vicious punch. Seeing the state I was in, Stephen looked ready to beat Caleb to death right then and there. Fuck. Stephen Shaw, how did you get in here? Caleb sputtered, stunned. Why did you hit me? Are you insane? Caleb tried to fight back, but he was still drunk and unsteady on his feet. Stephen kicked his leg out from under him. Caleb fell to his knees, and Stephen grabbed him by the hair. Caleb, not everyone is yours to touch. Stephen's voice was ice cold, but Caleb just laughed, his expression twisting into a perverse grin. Ha 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 ha, so you and Leo really do have a thing, don't you? I've already had my fun with him. You still want him? Stephen, I suddenly realized something today. You're pretty interesting when you're the one in control. Want to try it with me next time? Caleb tilted his head, rubbing it against Stephen's wrist. Stephen flung him away in disgust, slamming his head against the table. Caleb cursed a few times before passing out. I watched the whole scene from the edge of the tub. Suddenly, Stephen's cold eyes were on me. Didn't I tell you not to run off? Why don't you ever listen? Get up. He held out a hand to me. My hands were still bound with red rope. I leaned against the tub and let out a breath. Even if Stephen was an animal, at least he was a relatively normal one. I'd much rather be in his hands. I have no strength left. Humph. Did you have fun? I gave him a lazy look and smiled deliberately. It was amazing. 1,000,000 times better than your unskilled brute force. Stephen's hand froze. He gritted his teeth and sneered. Is that so? So this is the kind of game you like to play. Fine. I'll play with you. Stephen picked up a lit candle from the side. The flame melted the wax. One drop, then two. I flinched at the sensation. Stephen's hand moved slowly downwards. How could I possibly take this? Fuck. Stop. Are you gonna run away again? I glared at him stubbornly, refusing to answer. Stephen stared back at me. His gaze fell on the marks on my neck, then shifted to my back, which was covered in whip welts. His hand trembled, and he scooped me up in his arms, his voice laced with fury. Damn it, Leo, are you asking for it? Who gave you permission to let yourself get into this state? As we left, he gave Caleb's unconscious body one last kick. The bodyguards stayed behind to clean up the mess. Stephen took me to get my wounds treated. The doctor examined me and said there was nothing serious. Only then did Stephen relax. He carefully applied ointment to my wrists, glaring at me through gritted teeth. Did he hurt you? You're asking if I slept with him, aren't you? If I say yes, what will you do? Kill me? I tilted my head, deliberately provoking him. Whenever Stephen looked at me, it felt like I was the only person in the world he cared about. But he was about to get engaged. He shouldn't be giving me any false hope. Stephen's face darkened. I'll break all 3 of Caleb's legs and then skin him alive. As for you, we'll settle our score slowly. He sounded vicious. After finishing with the ointment, Stephen gently blew on my back. He asked if it hurt and told me it would get itchy as it healed, and to try not to scratch. I buried my face in the pillow and mumbled a reply. I really wanted to throw myself into his arms, just like before, and whine in that sickeningly sweet voice I used to annoy him with, to tell him how much it hurt and that I needed him to hold me. But we couldn't go back. I was woken up by the sound of arguing. My body ached as I walked out of the room. Downstairs, a woman's voice was nagging Stephen, complaining about this and that. I leaned over the second-floor railing, staring at the beautiful woman. She had a great figure, and the pale skin Stephen liked. Stephen impatiently told the butler to show her out. Was that his fiancée? Were they arguing about the wedding? Stephen turned and his eyes met mine. Come down and eat. I walked downstairs. He had already ladled out a bowl of light soup for me. Stephen was about to feed me. I dodged him and took the bowl myself. I'm not an invalid. Steven sat next to me and started peeling an orange. He never used to do things like this. When we first got together, the great Mr. Shaw couldn't even peel an apple. Later, to coax me, he started learning to make all sorts of fruit platters for me. It was hard to imagine a titan of industry actually cutting his hand while peeling fruit in the kitchen. Steven would then deliberately wave his injured hand in front of my face. And just like that, I'd forget I was ever mad at him. By the time I finished my soup, he had finished peeling the orange and handed it to me. Every segment was perfectly clean, without any of the white pith. I suppressed the warmth spreading in my chest and glanced around. It was the same villa as before, but the number of bodyguards seemed to have increased. Don't even think about it. You won't get away so easily this time, he said, shattering my thoughts. You're getting married. Isn't it a little inappropriate to keep me here? Doesn't your fiancé mind? Steven's hand paused, and he let out a soft laugh. She won't mind. But I minded. I chewed on the orange resentfully. I had to find a way out of here. I spent a few days recovering at the villa, and my body was feeling much better. I heard that a couple of guys had died during Caleb's games at Nanting before. Someone had leaked the story. Suddenly, everyone was avoiding the Smith family. The people who used to flatter him had all scattered. Now Caleb was public enemy number one and had been brought in for questioning. I slept too much during the day and couldn't sleep at night. I went out to the terrace for some fresh air. While I was there, I sent the files I'd gathered on the Smith family to Kay. I took off the necklace I was wearing. The pendant was a tiny USB drive, transferring data. Sent successfully. I let out a breath. Mission complete. I should have been happy, but my heart felt heavy as a stone. Suddenly, I heard the sound of urgent footsteps behind me. I turned to see Steven rushing downstairs. He must have caught something out of the corner of his eye, because he suddenly spun around and headed for the terrace. What are you doing out here? I just getting some air. What's wrong? I looked down at his feet. He was wearing his slippers on the wrong feet. Did he think I'd run away and came looking for me? Steven let out a sigh of relief and led me back inside. It gets cold in the mountains at night. Don't stay out too long. I got a bottle of milk from the fridge. Just as I was about to drink it, he took it from me and put it in the microwave. You just recovered. Have you already forgotten the doctor's orders? Watching his familiar, practiced movements, I felt a strange mix of emotions. He might as well just torture me every day and make me hate him. This tenderness was making it feel like I was still his lover. I lowered my eyes and saw his phone screen light up. He'd received an email. The subject line was Smith Corp Nanting. Huh? Why did that look so familiar? Wasn't that the file I had just sent a few minutes ago? Steven noticed me looking and didn't try to hide it. What's wrong? You have the nerve to ask. You're the one who hired Kay to get the files on the Smith family? Yes. He answered calmly, handing me the warm milk. I was so angry I wanted to throw it in his face. You couldn't have told me sooner? You let me go to Nanting and almost get killed by that psycho. I warned you. I didn't know you were so dedicated to your work, Steven said irritably. Besides, you disappeared for 3 years without a trace. How else was I supposed to bait you out? Damn, he was devious. I gritted my teeth. Well, the mission's over now. Taking over the Smith family's projects should cover the 300 million, right? We're even. I can go now, can't I? I stormed toward the door. A voice called out from behind me. You don't want your payment? My feet stopped of their own accord. Steven handed me a file folder. I took it, but he didn't let go. Leo, did you really think I'd let you go just because this is over? You're getting married. Why are you still clinging to me? Do you want me to be your dirty little secret? Why don't you ask me who I'm marrying? I froze, meeting his deep gaze, confused. Isn't it that beautiful woman from yesterday? Now it was Steven's turn to be stunned. That's my old man's new wife. She's always hounding me for company shares. I can't be bothered with her. My eyes widened. Your dad remarried? So she's your... I couldn't believe yesterday's woman was his stepmother. No wonder she was so arrogant. I knew Steven's father was a womanizer, but I didn't know he was still going so strong. Impressive. Then who are you marrying? Open the folder and see for yourself. I tore open the file. Inside wasn't a check for 30 million. It was a ring. I stood there, stunned, my mind unable to process it. Stephen touched the back of my neck, his fingertips tracing the raised scar, the one left from removing the tracking chip. It seemed he knew everything. So, my master spy, are you satisfied with this payment? Aren't you afraid I'll just lie to you again? I could take you for everything you have. Then you'd better be prepared to lie to me for the rest of our lives. His deep voice was incredibly gentle. I had lied to him for 4 years. He had been angry for 3. But the moment he caught me, he'd already forgiven himself for forgiving me. Where else in the world could I find someone so soft-hearted? Only Stephen would indulge me like this. My chest felt like it was filling with a fizzy, bittersweet ache, about to overflow. My eyes welled up with tears as I threw myself into his arms. Stephen, I love you. This time it's real. Last time too. Epilogue. Stephen cleaned up my identity. I was finally free from the treacherous world of corporate espionage. We registered our marriage abroad. On the way back, I got curious and asked, so if we want to get a divorce, do we have to go abroad again? Stephen ignored me, his face frighteningly dark. When we got home, he locked me in the bathroom and taught me a lesson. We just got married and you're already thinking about divorce? I was just… He wouldn't listen to my explanations, just kept tormenting me. I got bored staying at home all day, so I became Stephen's bodyguard. But he didn't need my protection at all. In the office, the bodyguard, would be sitting and eating while he stood over his files. His eyes would be glued to the computer, but he'd still nag me not to be a picky eater and to stop throwing out my carrots. So I'd have to pick the carrots back up and put them in his bowl. His secretary came in once and froze, probably having never seen such an audacious bodyguard. After spending a while at Stephen's company, I noticed something off about one of the employees. His methods seemed an awful lot like my old spying style. This technician seemed quiet and shy, always meek when talking to people. I tested him a few times in secret. One night, he was working late at the office, unaware I was watching him. He tried to sneak into his supervisor's office to look for something. I appeared and we started fighting. Turns out he was a trained fighter. The man's face suddenly turned vicious, and he pulled a knife from his pocket. Files scattered across the floor. We were right in the middle of it. Suddenly, all the lights in the company turned on. I had the man pinned, a knife to his throat. Stephen looked at me and roared, "Leo, are you insane? This guy is a spy. You have to believe me." He angrily pulled me away. The other bodyguards took the man away for questioning. Stephen used a handkerchief to wipe the blood from my hands, his brow furrowing when he saw the cut. "I believe you, but that doesn't mean you can try to block a knife with your bare hands. Are you an idiot? It was an emergency." He unhappily took me to get my wound treated. He gave me the cold shoulder for a week because of it. It wasn't until I went to his study and acted cute that he finally agreed to come back to our room to sleep. Later, Stephen licked the scar on my hand over and over. He said if I ever got hurt again, he'd kill me. His voice was vicious, and his thrusts were a little too forceful. This wasn't killing me. This was pure pleasure. I gave him a wicked smile, hooked my arms around his neck, and softened my voice. "You're so handsome when you're worried about me, hubby." Stephen cursed under his breath. And just like that, he accidentally finished early. Looks like I'd get to bed early tonight. I was getting sleepy, but the person next to me was tossing and turning, seemingly restless with excitement. He couldn't resist nudging me. "Don't sleep. Say it again."